You don't actually have super many non-traditional candy opinions that I know of. Every
No.
time you've given me a candy opinion, it's been boilerplate banger. Exactly because you're kind of a non-traditional opinion guy. Like that's kind of one of
Yeah.
your shticks. But like you're pretty predictable here, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, I don't have non-traditional opinions just to have non-traditional opinions. It just
Sure.
is, I'm a person that has strongly held opinions, and some of them happen to be controversial, which I can't help. It's just how I
No,
feel.
it's how you're built.
When it comes to candy, I definitely am strict traditionalist. Your Reese's cups. I mean, grade A, S tier candy.
Yeah, can't beat them. Yeah.
Uh, of course, your Kit Kats. Your Snickers. I mean, really any of the chocolate plus combo.
Mm-hmm.
I fuck with any of those,
How's
basically.
your M&M rankings?
Oh, M&Ms, I would say S tier M&Ms, peanut butter
Yeah, correct.
and almond when you can get them, amazing.
Yeah, too
Uh
rare for me to be in my rankings, but they
yeah,
they are
I
good.
I agree. They're very good. They're harder to find now.
Uh-huh.
The original recipe crispy M&Ms before
Yes.
they changed it, but crispy M&Ms when they first came out were top tier.
Yep.
Peanut M&Ms, and then kind of everything else for me would sort of fall after that. What is your
No,
M&M
you're
ranking?
that was correct. You
Okay,
nailed
good.
it 100%.
Great. Pass the audition.
You have the correct candy opinions. Happy Halloween.
Welcome in to It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on Twitter /X at RealBirdLawyer, on Blue Sky at Bird Law Expert. Here with me as always, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Witt on Twitter /X, on Blue Sky at Taylor M. Witt. What's going on, buddy?
Guys, we promised it's going to be sunny. It's always sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. Sometimes we've handled these losses in different ways over the years on the show.
Sure, of
And
course.
we've skipped weeks and we've switched up the theme and we've been all sad and played the like sad sunny music. No, that's not. We're fine. Everything's fine. We move forward.
We took a couple of days. We're recording this on a Wednesday, so we've had some time to lick our wounds. And we did discuss completely skipping this episode. Full
We did.
disclosure for our fans.
But we were discussing that like in the fourth quarter of like getting our ass kicked. Like
literally
it was
before the game had even ended, it was like, we're not going to do a podcast this week. But listen, we can't give Broncos fans the satisfaction of knowing that we're so upset that we're going to skip the podcast this week. That's really what it comes down to. We are here to show that this loss, that's fine. Congratulations. You got one for the first time in 17 tries. Good for you. Good for you. We're brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. If you missed out on preseason best ball, you can still draft on Underdog Fantasy and get involved in their pick'ems and over-unders. Use our promo code SUNNY, SUNNY, matching deposit up to your first $100. And we've been doing these every couple of weeks. We got to give listener league fantasy updates. In our redraft league, Doughy Fresh and Bulk 50 are in first and second place there. Roscoe 836 is leading the league in points, despite a 2-6 head-to-head record.
Crazy. It's almost impossible
Because he's allowed 115 points more than any other team in the league. Now, of course, for you fantasy neophytes out there, you have no control over the amount of points that your team allows. Like the amount of points that get scored against you, you have no control over
called
that.
allows.
Yes, that's true.
You are not allowing any.
You are not allowing or consenting to anything. But since we know ball, and really I have to give you credit for developing this system long ago, I just glommed onto it and adopted it and passed it off as my own. We have a wild card spot. We have 2 wild card spots in our league. First 4 are based on record. 5th and 6th playoff spots are based on total points scored that are not in the top 4. So Roscoe is basically like locked into a playoff spot despite his 2-6 record. Let's just pat ourselves on the back for being good commissioners here.
I was patting myself on the back and I realized that doesn't really play well on audio format. So pat.
The wild card is also helping you out in our Dynasty League. The Listener Dynasty League, you are 3-5, but you are 3rd in points scored. So you are looking great for a playoff spot. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, feeling good. My bozo quarterback, Josh Allen, is a little banged up this week.
Oh,
and,
I know that game.
Yes, you do know that game very well. And, despite that being potentially good news for the Chiefs. Every time you have a player on a rival team of the Chiefs, I'm not conflicted. Like, I would rather if Josh Allen said I'm going to take the rest of the year off and go, find myself in Europe or something, like, I would not be upset about it. But there is kind of that split loyalty a little bit when your guys aren't doing their best. And so he's been really, really good this year, as you know. So we'll see how it goes.
And it's different in a dynasty league. You feel more ownership over these players when you have them for,
exactly right.
more than one season. I have had Josh Allen on my dynasty team for a couple of years now in our other dynasty league. I am tied for first in this league with a 6-2 record, despite being 10th out of 12 in points scored. And
bullshit.
I mean, a lot of people have been very upset by this, but I just want to tell all the haters out there, my 10th place point total is completely deceptive. So if you take out my lowest scoring week, I would be averaging 126 a week, which would be good for 5th in the league, not 10th. Okay. I would be right up there, very competitive in terms of weekly points scored. I had one bad week. I had 1 week below 111. I've scored over 111 every week. That's a good scoring for our format. It was in week 5 when Kyron Williams, Justin Jefferson, and Anthony Richardson all got hurt, and I scored 69 points. Okay. Nice. It was not nice. It was the opposite of nice.
It was pretty funny.
It was not funny, but look, there's only 5 games left in the regular season in fantasy, which is crazy.
Which is insane.
I'm 6-2, despite being 10th in points scored. So I'm just going to find a way to win like 3 more games. I'm going to make it into the playoffs, and I'm going to avoid relegation, baby.
Before anyone freaks out, there's actually 6 games left because week 14 is now a regular season game as well. So good effort there on the math, but you're not here for your math. You're here for your takes.
Absolutely not here for my math. Also not here for the math in our Cutthroat League. DP Owens J and Ehace Golf eliminated over the last 2 weeks. Ehace had the highest scoring team in the league, still does have the highest scoring team in the league, despite his last place finish this week. He had Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devontae Adams all on the same team. The latter two really let him down on Monday Night Football. He needed about 15 points, like 15, 16 points between the two of those guys, and he didn't get it. And he gets eliminated with all of those great players hitting the waiver wire and going for a buku bucks today. Dennis, DP Owens J, fell to a subpar performance by Tua Tagovailoa a couple weeks ago against the Eagles, and a disastrous 1.1 points from Gabe Davis, who's playing the Patriots, who, don't let him do the Gabe Davis thing where he's completely alone with nobody within 20 yards and he scores a touchdown. And, the Patriots are like, we're familiar with your game. That's not going to happen against us.
Gabe Davis is one of the most fraudulent NFL players I've ever witnessed. Ever. It's unbelievable.
Speaking of fraudulent, my team is I'm going to be the next team eliminated. I'm just going to go on the record right here. There was some mistakes were made, and my team, which by the way is the best team in the league on paper, unfortunately has Travis Etienne, Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel all out on bye this week. And this is now a 9-team league where we're starting 2 quarterbacks. I had to pick up both of my starting quarterbacks on waivers. Mac Jones and Daniel Jones, come on down. It's not great. It's not a great situation.
Jones brothers. You had Justin Fields. He's also not playing this week. I mean, you had a good squad. It's just
I had Josh Dobbs. I had Kyler Murray, and I picked up Josh Dobbs last week for this. Like, I was like, look, I see what's coming with the apocalypse. Like, I need a quarterback this week so I don't have to pick up 2 quarterbacks next week. So I picked up Josh Dobbs for free agency, right? And then the Cardinals turned around for no reason and benched him, and then they traded him away. Yeah. And so I was like, Kyler will be ready, or I'll play Josh Dobbs, and now I'm starting the Jones boys. So RIP me. It's going to be fine.
Join me, brother.
I will be joining you in the afterlife next week. We got a great show for you guys this week. We've got news. We have a brief, as short as we could possibly make it, recap of the Chiefs' Week 8 loss to the Broncos. We'll spend the bare minimum amount of time that we have to on that to move on and address it and move past it. And then we will preview Chiefs versus Dolphins in Deutschland. Chiefs are traveling to Frankfurt on Thursday to take on the Dolphins on Sunday morning, 8:30 a.m. kickoff in Kansas City. But first, Justin Ross, who of course was arrested last week for domestic violence, has been placed on the commissioner's exempt list. This is kind of the best case scenario for the Chiefs. Let the legal process play out. We don't always see the commissioner's exempt list implemented consistently, because nothing that the league does with respect to its disciplinary policies is consistent. But in this case, the commissioner stepped in, placed Justin Ross on the exempt list. That means that he is no longer taking up a roster spot, and it means that the Chiefs have no obligation to make any kind of personnel move involving Ross until he is removed from the exempt list, which you would have to think at this point would be when his case is resolved. Because it's a misdemeanor, just making a prediction here, I would guess that he will be able to reach a plea in this case pretty quickly. And I would guess that since he is an undrafted free agent who doesn't have a mega contract in the league, that he's going to want to get this resolved pretty quickly. It's a little bit different with, we saw obviously different situation, but with Frank Clark a couple of years ago.
Sure.
With the gun charges, Frank's a veteran in the league. He had a big money deal. He wanted to be able to keep playing and then sort of push, this off to the offseason and deal with it then. I'm sure Justin Ross would prefer to get this resolved as quickly as possible. And if he's going to have a future in the league, which still is very much in doubt, get back on the field and start serving that suspension so that he can be back on an NFL roster, if not with the Chiefs, then with another team.
Yeah, I find the Chiefs' handling of this situation maybe not surprising is the right word, but just they could have certainly cut bait with him the day that this came out, regardless of how it plays out in court and how everything, they could have just said, yeah, buddy, you're not getting any playing time.
You're not worth it.
You got arrested. You clearly screwed up. See ya. I mean, we've seen that happen with a lot of NFL teams, and we probably haven't noticed it happen with a lot more of them because the players that get cut in these situations are usually players that we're not paying attention to. But the fact that, the Chiefs have decided to, the exempt list does mean that they don't have to worry about the 53-man roster spot, so they can go ahead and kind of stash him a little bit here. But the next check for him will be when he gets removed from the exempt list. And if the Chiefs then decide to, move a roster spot around and make room for him again, then they've gotten over it and forgiven him. But there is always the chance that as soon as he gets unexempt, that the Chiefs say bye-bye.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Justin Ross. Let's talk about the injury situation here. And it's not great, but it's not terrible. It certainly is worse than it's been in recent weeks. We have the practice report, of course, the injury report through Wednesday's practice. 2 players not practicing on Wednesday. Running back Jerick McKinnon with a groin injury. Linebacker Willie Gay Jr. did not practice with a lower back injury on Wednesday. And that one is obviously the big one. We have several other guys on the injury report, including Tommy Townsend, who has a hand injury.
That's fine. We have his backup.
He's a punter. Yeah, sure. Patrick Mahomes is the emergency punter. He was limited. Everybody else on the injury report, full participant, including Richie James, the wide receiver, who is eligible to return from the injured reserve, but they have not activated him yet. But just circling back to Willie Gay, that's obviously the biggest injury here because he came out of the game on Sunday against the Broncos. Nick Bolton is already on. He actually hasn't technically been placed on IR yet, which is a little bit odd, unless I missed it. But
I thought they did IR. I'll double check it while you're going through the rest of it. But yeah.
Obviously, we don't expect him back until the end of the season, kind of the last couple of games of the regular season and into the playoffs. And Drew Tranquil and Leo Chenal were also banged up in the game on Sunday. So really everyone in the Chiefs' amazing linebacker core, is banged up and is not at 100% right now. Remains to be seen whether Willie will be able to go against the Dolphins, but that's a big loss because, as we'll talk about, while Nick Bolton's, forte isn't necessarily, east-west speed, sideline to sideline speed, which is what you need against the Dolphins with their sort of outside run game. Willie Gay, absolutely, that is 100% the thing that he is best at, just being able to go side to side and chase guys down with that speed that he has. That would be a big loss if he's not able to go on Sunday.
It would. Confirming the Chiefs did place Bolton on IR on Saturday, which is kind of I'm sure it just flew under the radar during the weekend. But also, the fact that Willie's injury is a lower back injury, that's got to be kind of a tough one to just bounce right back, especially with travel. He's going to be on a plane for 9 hours or whatever. And although maybe their PJs go a little bit quicker than a commercial flight over there, but it's linebacker is a position that we felt like kings 2 weeks ago or whenever, right before Bolton got hurt. I mean, there were 4 guys. Bolton came back from the injury and you're thinking like, man, they've got 4 guys that can all play at a high level and contribute. And then, Bolton gets hurt and we're kind of like, dang, well, if there was a position that we could have taken a hit in, linebacker was like one of them. The Chiefs are very deep and elite at linebacker. We can't take another one though. And then now, of course, Gay. And then it was good to see Drew Tranquill get back in the game against the Broncos after he got hurt, because if he was good enough to go in that game and not on the injury report here, then whatever sidelined him for a little bit there was no big deal. And Leo obviously not being on the injury report either. So those two guys are good to go. But like, man, nothing against Jack Cochran, but like he ain't it compared to Willie Gay and Nick Bolton. So gotta get Willie feeling 100%. If he's not 100%, boy, I don't know how you could put him out there against that team. I mean, I guess you can. You got to try, but like, not a great situation.
The Chiefs did bring back old friend Darius Harris, who obviously has played some snaps with the Chiefs at linebacker over the last few seasons. I read that they tried to bring back Ben Neiman, but they were not able to make that work. And honestly,
because a crowd met them at One Arrowhead Drive with pitchforks and torches.
I think a team protected him, if I have the details right there. But in any case, and I don't know why that would be, but if it had to be one of those two, I'm glad that it was Darius Harris and not Ben Neiman. For my own mental health. If I had to see Ben Neiman on the field against the Dolphins on Sunday, I might throw myself off of a tall building.
You might do that anyway based on how things are going here. But
let's see how things go on Sunday. We're not doing a what is happening this week, but we have some other news from around the league here. The NFL trade deadline comes and goes without the Chiefs making any major moves. We knew that was probably going to be the case after they went out and got McCole Hardman, and there was reporting over the weekend coming into the trade deadline that the Chiefs were unlikely to make any new acquisitions. They did not. The biggest news was the Washington Commanders offloading half their starting defensive line. They sent Montez Sweat to the Bears and Chase Young to the 49ers, which is crazy. I mean, they picked up Brandon Gregory. They've got Chase Young. They've got Nick Bosa. They've got Armstead. They've got all these guys just absolutely crazy. No quarterback. And they are, losers of 3 straight. But the only wide receiver moved at the deadline was Cleveland's Donovan Peoples-Jones. So not a trade deadline where you saw an impact wide receiver get traded. It's pretty rare for wide receivers, impact wide receivers to get traded midseason, because obviously there's a lot that goes into learning the playbook, learning the routes, and then developing chemistry with your quarterback that you don't, without having a full training camp and offseason program to develop that. It can be pretty hard for a guy to come in and make an impact. But the Chiefs didn't miss out on any wide receiver acquisitions.
Well, they didn't miss out on any, as in wide receivers didn't go somewhere instead of the Chiefs, but they certainly missed out by not getting any of them. And I mean, I guess missed out is kind of a, beauty in the eye of the beholder there. Some people did think that it would have been too hard to integrate, like you were talking about. Wide receiver is certainly a position that it takes chemistry both with the quarterback and the playbook. I mean, it's a double. You've got to learn, tendencies and a lot more than some of the other positions where you just line up one-on-one and try and beat a guy. But boy, little concerning, I guess, that the Chiefs have decided that this is the group that they're going to try to win a World Series. World Series. I'm looking at Texas trying to win a World Series right now, but win a Super Bowl with. It's a little concern.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to the Broncos game, but something that we normally cover in what is happening, but we are dropping it in the news this week because usually what is happening is geared towards things that are good or funny or positive for the Chiefs. And there really weren't any of those things this week. Except this. Last night, the wee hours of Halloween night / morning, Raiders head coach Josh McDaniels and GM Dave Ziegler were both fired by Mark Davis, canned. I believe that makes Josh McDaniels the first coach in the Super Bowl era to be fired twice within a season and a half of being hired.
Yeah, within 2. I mean, he's the first one to not finish his second season with 2 different teams because he got fired. And, he's so unlikable. He's probably the most, I know Urban Meyer's up there for a lot of people, but like, I think pound for pound, Josh McDaniels is the most unlikable head coach in the history of the NFL. And he had this aura from his time in New England when the fucking GOAT was his quarterback and everything was easy and he had a great defense and a great head coach and he just was going to call whatever
And
he
Tom
wanted because it
Brady
all
again.
works.
Yeah, Tom Brady,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And so, now he tried it with Denver. It didn't work. Then he crawled back to New England. Then he tried it in freaking Indianapolis for 8 hours and decided he didn't want to do that, crawl back to in New England. And then he tried it in Vegas and they wouldn't want him either. Just a ridiculous situation for him. Ridiculous that Vegas had to settle after John Gruden left with $40 million on the table as head coach last year. They settled out of some unknown number, but probably you would think if they owed him 40 and it was a settlement, it's probably somewhere around 20, I would think. Yeah. And then now they have to pay McDaniels.
They gave him a 6-year contract. So, I mean, they've got 4 years left to pay.
Even in year 2 and at the end of year 2 in his 6-year contract. So just a really funny situation. As you pointed out to me earlier today, they still are paying Chandler Jones, who they let go and paid a bunch of money to. They still just everyone. They're just such a mess right now. Just a really, really funny situation as Raider haters that we are.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously like it's the right move. The guy's terrible. But
yes.
Like the right move would have been to not hire him in the first place. And so, at this point, firing him when you still have to pay him for 4 more years and you're talking about one of the cash poorest owners in the league and Mark Davis, it's going to be interesting to see who they can bring in there this offseason. And I mean, you got to think that like after you fire a coach before he even completes his second season and the coach before that got taken down by the league for being, racist and misogynistic and sexist and all those other things. It's not like it was a hit job.
Rich Bisaccia had stepped in last year after Gruden got fired and
that
did great
team to the playoffs,
and was a really, really inspiring head coach story and all that stuff. And then they didn't even want him back.
Give him a chance, right?
So they're clearly not treating their coaches, or I mean, the coaches also have sucked. But then when they had a good thing going, they didn't recognize that either. They blow their first round picks. So who even wants to go in there and then wait for them to draft some idiot that's going to go to jail in 2 years with their first round pick? Like, it's just a huge mess, and couldn't happen to a nicer bunch over there.
Well, not only that, but just to close the book on the Raiders for now. I mean, this team already has 3 wins, so. They're behind the Bears.
Williams.
They're behind both of the Bears draft picks because the Bears have the Panthers draft pick. The Panthers did finally win a game, but I mean, they're probably, I mean, you got an interim head coach in there now that's going to want to do whatever he can to win games, right? Because you're auditioning for that job in the future, and you're also auditioning for potentially other head coaching jobs around the league. You've got a guy in there who doesn't have any job security beyond this season. He has no incentive to do anything other than do the best job that he possibly can and win games, which would be terrible for the Raiders. So, Tavis updates. We skipped them last week because we had a lot going on, but this week we need a little pick me up for the world of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. I mentioned I mentioned this off the air. Before we started recording. She's a billionaire now, so that's exciting. Travis is dating a billionaire officially. That's pretty cool and exciting for him. It's great news for Travis. It's great news for Travis Kelce. I guess the big news this week, besides the fact that Taylor Swift is a billionaire and is again setting records on Spotify, and 1989 Taylor's version came out and it bangs and it slaps and it rules, is that the Chiefs lost their first game since she appeared at Arrowhead back against the Bears, and this is the first time the Chiefs have lost a game. They lost the Taylor winning streak. She obviously wasn't in attendance, but on the bright side,
they're 4-4, or sorry, they're 2-2 with her not in attendance, and 4-0 when she is. So got to get
her. She's probably not going to be there in Germany, I wouldn't think. No. I haven't heard that she will be, but she's got her tour in South America coming up. Good news is she didn't dump Travis after the loss. She was not just in it for the winning streak. She really does have legitimate feelings for him. They were hanging out in Kansas City this week for Halloween. When I listened to New Heights this morning, I counted at least 5 times in the episode where Travis said, let's keep this thing moving, which he does occasionally anyway, but you could tell that he really wanted to get to, I want to be done with the podcast so I can hang out with my girlfriend, billionaire superstar Taylor Swift.
3 commas in her bank account. It's a lot of commas.
It's pretty good. All right, let's rip the Band-Aid off. We got to get through this. Week 8, Chiefs 9, Broncos 24. I mean, listen, we already kind of talked about it. This was a terrible game. I think Travis actually said it best. He described it as, quote, fucking embarrassing, man. That's what it was. That's what it was. This was obviously the Chiefs' first loss against the Broncos since September of 2015. The Chiefs had won 16 in a row. They were 4 away from tying the NFL record. And I guess for me, before we get into the numbers, the figures, it wasn't so much the fact that the Chiefs lost this game, because we've been talking about this for as long as we've been doing the podcast. You cannot beat an NFL team this many times in a row. It's only happened. I mean, there's only been 2 longer streaks in the history of the NFL than the streak that the Chiefs just lost against the Broncos. It's really hard to beat an NFL team this many times in a row. And the Broncos were long overdue to finally take a game off the Chiefs. For me, what was embarrassing was the way that the Chiefs lost this game. And that is what had me so upset for as long as I was.
Yeah, I agree. It's one thing to lose a game. First of all, winning in the NFL is hard, is really, really hard, regardless of any other circumstance involved. It's just every one of those wins is precious. And then 2, beating a team twice in the same year, very hard to do. 3, beating a team twice in 3 weeks is very hard to do. 4, it's hard to win when your quarterback has the flu. We'll talk about that. Sure. Makes things pretty challenging. 5, the Broncos have been dreaming about beating the Kansas City Chiefs for, they probably, once they dropped a couple of those games in that streak, they probably didn't think about it too much. But once that streak hit like 5 or 6 out of the 16, like they started thinking like, all right, it's been 3 years, got to beat these guys. All right, it's been 6 years, got to beat these guys. Like just, they've been dreaming about it. They literally built their entire team to be able to beat the Chiefs first, and then whatever other good things could come their way after that is gravy. But like they needed to beat the Chiefs. So you just can't match that energy no matter how hard you try. And you can be better than them. And for 16, straight games, the Chiefs were better than the Broncos. But like the Broncos are a professional football team. Eventually, that dam's going to break and that team's going to get one on you. And, they've got some talent. They've got some reasons to be able to play with the Chiefs, and they don't have a lot of talent. Clearly, the Chiefs have a lot more. But when the circumstances line up and when you've got a sick quarterback and not much time to prepare and all that stuff, like, yeah, it can happen. So that was my thought, was that the blowout loss is hard, but it would be much harder if those were happening a lot. The fact that was only his 5th loss by 10 or more points in his NFL career. Is it 4th? Buffalo, Tennessee. I shouldn't name all of our trauma in one. Tampa, and this one. This was the 4th. Yeah. So, that's when you've had a quarterback for 6 seasons and you can name the 4 times that they've lost by more than 8 points. Like, it's fine. Everything's fine. It sucked, but it's fine.
Let's get into the numbers, the figures, because I have specifically pulled stats that will help to illustrate that it is fine. Because again, this is a podcast about how sunny it is in Chiefs Kingdom and not about how dreadful it is. We are going to talk about that a little bit in a new segment that we'll debut here in a minute. But from Yahoo's Charles McDonald, he said, thought this was interesting. Chiefs offense, 4th in yards per play, 5.8 yards per play. 2nd in yards per drive, 38.6 yards per drive. 4th in points per drive, 2.51 points per drive. 6th in touchdowns per drive, 0.27. 5th in EPA per drive, 0.071. 7th in success rate, 45.7%. 4th in EPA per dropback, 0.175. So by pretty much any metric, the Chiefs are still a top 5 offense this year.
Yeah. It's
just that we're accustomed to more than that.
Yep. That's, being a top 5 offense is such it's an afterthought for us. We were talking about a top 5 offense in the history of the NFL before this little run here, and top 5 in the history of the NFL might be like, are you sure it's only 5? Like, they're right up there. This run that Mahomes has been on is right there with every other all-time elite offense for best ever. And so now you look at, okay, they're fifth in this and they're fourth in this. And it's like, so there are 3 teams better than the Chiefs on offense.
Right.
Why?
Right.
How? Like, you're right. It doesn't say that the Chiefs are not going to be favored and win a bunch of games and be able to win the Super Bowl and all the things that a normal team would be thrilled about at this point in the year. But the historic pace has taken a little bit of a backseat right now.
I'm glad you brought up historic pace. Here's some stats from RBSDM that I pulled today. So that EPA per play number, 0.071, just to give you some context for that number, because expected points added per play, it's sort of a difficult thing to conceptualize. 0.071 is really good. It's 5th in the league this year, obviously. Chiefs are the 5th best offense by expected points added per play this season. But I went back and looked at 2018 to 2022, and the Chiefs averaged about 0.17 EPA per play on offense from 2018 to 2022. So their offense was more than twice as good in 2018 to 2022 by EPA per play. This year they're at 0.071, which is, again, less than half as good. It's still top 5 in the league. It's still really good, but it's just not. I mean, this was the best offense in the league last year without Tyreek Hill, with a lot of the same personnel. Obviously, they had Juju Smith-Schuster in the wide receiver room. But, I mean, having brought back McCole Hardman, almost everybody else in this wide receiver room is the same that they had last year. And the EPA per play numbers are way down. Now, it should be pointed out that offense in general is way down across the league this year. The strategy that defensive coordinators specifically schemed up to stop the Chiefs when they had Tyreek Hill, the too high, the shell coverages, they're playing those against everybody now, and it's limited explosives to an incredible degree. Explosive play rate in the NFL is way down. Scoring in general is way down this year. So that's part of the reason why you're seeing the Chiefs still have a top 5 offense, despite the fact that for us, I mean, we look at this and we think this is the worst offense in the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid era. Yeah. Like, how could this possibly be a top 5 offense in the league? That's why. It's because offenses in general are not as proficient this year as they have been the last 4 or 5 years in the Mahomes era. And all things considered, the Chiefs are still pretty good. I've got another one here from Arjun Menon. He put together a chart of all of the PFF grading for the different areas of the field. So you've got short accuracy, or behind the line of scrimmage, short, intermediate accuracy, and deep ball accuracy. So Patrick Mahomes, by PFF grade and PFF charting, is the most accurate quarterback in the NFL this season. That's after the Broncos game. So a 60% overall accuracy score. I don't really know what that number means, because PFF's metrics are a little esoteric. But what I do know is that it is the highest of all the quarterbacks, which means he's the best. So behind the line of scrimmage, he has an 83% accurate throw rate. He has 59% in the short area, 51% intermediate, and 33% deep. So there's only one quarterback that's better than Patrick Mahomes on passes behind the line of scrimmage, which is Kenny Pickett, hilariously.
Wow.
There's only 3 quarterbacks that have a higher short area accuracy than 59%. So he's 4th in that. And he's 3rd in the NFL, and there's like 60 quarterbacks that they've charted at this point, in intermediate accuracy. That 51% accuracy score for the intermediate range, he's 3rd in the NFL. So, I mean, he's top 4 in all these categories, except for the deep ball accuracy. And that the eye test bears that out. So, I mean, still a really good player, still playing at a high level.
Sure.
And it's important for us to remember that after the flu game did not go like we hoped that it would.
Yeah, it's perspective. It always is with him. Both the crazy, sometimes when he's performing really well, I feel like it's worth it to step back and be like, hey, everyone, just realize how insane it is. What he's doing right now does not normally get done by anyone at any time throughout the league. And so then when he has the flu and has to play against an NFL defense, just let's remember that too.
Let's remember that too. We're going to drop a new segment here called State of the Chiefs.
Hello, fellow American. This you should vote me. I leave power. Good. Thank you. Thank you. If you vote me, I'm hot. Taxes, they'll be lower. Sun. The Democratic vote for me is right thing to do. So do.
this is going to replace for this segment the Chief system, because the Chief system is obviously the system that they employ when they win the game, and they did not win the game against the Broncos. So we have to talk about the state of the Chiefs and not the Chief system. It's just sort of a way for us to riff about where the team is currently, and I'll kick it off. I'll be honest. The vibes after the loss on Sunday obviously were catastrophic, not just between you and me, but I would say on Chiefs X/Twitter. I'm sure all corners of the Chiefs kingdom were feeling the hurt from that loss over the Broncos. And again, like I said, not just the fact that we lost the streak, but the way that the team performed, and in particular, the way that the offense performed. 5 turnovers, 9 points, one of the worst offensive performances of the Patrick Mahomes era. And I wanted to talk about this briefly because I think, and you and I are as guilty of this as anybody, but I think when we talk about the team, literally when we do the recap or at the preview part later, we always start with the Chiefs on offense. Like we always talk about the offense first. Yeah. The offense has always been better than the defense throughout the Patrick Mahomes era. And most years it hasn't even been close. You know, the best defense that the Chiefs have had in the Mahomes era is like 14th, and the worst offense that they've had has been like 5th. So it is weird for us to even conceive of the fact that the defense is the better half of this roster, and not only conceive of it, but like accept that the team is still good, even though the offense is not nearly as good as we're used to seeing. Like the offense is still good, it just isn't historic, and the defense is so much better than we're accustomed to, that I don't know, it just is really hard to wrap your brain around, because the offense, it's hard to understand why it's not as good as it was last year, because again, like a lot of the personnel is the same. Patrick Mahomes is still the quarterback. Andy Reid is still the play caller. You know, like, okay, Matt Nagy replaced Derek Bieniemy, but we all know that EB wasn't calling plays, you know, and Matt Nagy did a great job with Alex Smith when he was the offensive coordinator. So I don't think that Matt Nagy came in and, you know, made the offense worse, right? Like the infrastructure around the team is all pretty much the same. It just is hard to wrap our heads around the offense being just a really good offense instead of a historic offense. But I think equally hard for us to wrap our heads around the fact that this defense is still, notwithstanding Sunday's final score, really good. And I thought they were really good on Sunday.
They were really good on Sunday. They've been really good all year. I feel so much, I've said this before, especially the last couple of weeks, I feel so much more at peace and calm with the defense on the field than I do the offense. And part of it also is one of the sides is exceeding expectations and one of them isn't meeting them. And so that frustration level certainly plays a big factor into it. I expect that offense every time I see Patrick Mahomes take the field to score touchdowns. And every time they don't do that, it's devastating to me. Whereas the defense, I expect them to get their asses kicked because that's what I've seen for a while. And they've clearly, not only have they not gotten their asses kicked, they've been doing the ass kicking. They've been a really, really solid defense. So you're absolutely right. That perspective is weird and it's hard for us to adjust to. I've got some numbers to compare this season versus the other 5 in the Mahomes era. Just a couple of different overall team numbers here. Okay. So I'm going to start with wins. 2 years, the Chiefs have been better than 6-2 through the eight game point. They were 7-1 in 18 and 7-1 in 20. And then they're 6-2 right here. And they were 5-3 in 19 when they won the Super Bowl, and 4-4 in 21 when they, of course, made the AFC Championship game. Wins, doing pretty fine there. I thought this was interesting. Completion percentage is Patrick Mahomes' career high through 8 games, 68.4%. Bears out what you were just talking about, him being the most accurate quarterback in the league so far right now. He's never had an accuracy that high through these games. Now, yards, touchdowns, picks, all at the worst they've been through 8 games. And that includes 2021 when he was really struggling. It is crazy. Now the picks, I guess he had 10 picks through 8 games in 2021, and he has 8 so far in 23. But then the other 4 years, 6-1 through 8 games. He was, of course, in 19 and 20 on an absolute heater there. So, I mean, the offensive numbers there are not quite where they used to or where they need to be. However, sack numbers low, 6-year low at 10 sacks so far through 8 games. His sack percentage of 3.13 is the lowest through 8 games in his career. But adjusted net yards per attempt tied for the lowest season with that 2021 season where the Chiefs were 4-4. They had a 6.44 adjusted net yards per attempt. That's the exact same number down to the 6.44 that they have so far this year. But now you get into some interesting stuff on the other side of the ball. So points scored, of course, the Chiefs are the lowest on offense that they've been through 8 weeks at 187 points. The next lowest is 208. So 21 points more, 3 touchdowns more through 8 games, but points allowed. We've talked about this. It's hilarious. The Chiefs have allowed 129 points. The second lowest through 8 games is 152, and then 181, and then 189, and then 205, and then 220. And all 5 of those teams made at least the AFC Championship game. 2 of them won the Super Bowl. 2019 was 30 points or 50 points worse than this at 181, and 2022 was 189. Both those teams won the Super Bowl. So pretty good on the old points allowing scale. Point differential, this is the 3rd best of the 6 seasons in point differential, due in large part to that ridiculous defensive prowess there. And then really just other than that, takeaways, the Chiefs are 2nd of those 6 seasons in takeaways with 12. They had 14 in 2020 through 8 games. And I wanted to quickly hit the rushing numbers. Just the Chiefs in rushing yards are right there in the middle of the pack, 3rd out of those 6 at 841 yards rushing. So, I mean, they're not really struggling there. However, they haven't punched it in rushing as much as all the other years. The rushing touchdowns are at 4 this year. The next lowest was 6 through 8 games. So got to probably pick it up on the ground a little bit there. And then finally, yards per play. On offense, they are the lowest. On defense, they are by far the lowest, about half a yard, a little bit more than a half a yard lower than next best per play than the next best defense in the Mahomes era. So the state of the Chiefs to me is that the defense is picking up the slack for the offense. It's just that, you know, when you combine, if you drop the offense a little bit from where they were, but you really raise the floor on the defense, like that's still a recipe to go win a Super Bowl. Absolutely. If you can hold these other teams to 14, 17, 19 points, whatever it is, like the shitty Mahomes offense on the Chiefs can scratch out 20 points. Like that's not, you know, you don't need them to go out there and put up 35 just to pray and hope that you're going to win the game. So that's kind of where my head's at, is on the state of the Chiefs.
I want to make one more point before we move on to our awards that I think dovetails nicely with what you just said, and it's about ceiling and floor. So when I look at this team, there is an obvious weakness, and we all know what it is, the elephant in the room. It's the wide receiver room. The wide receivers on this team have directly led to both the Chiefs' losses in terms of creating turnovers, putting the ball on the ground, you know, putting the ball in the hands of defensive backs when it's supposed to be in their hands and going for touchdowns, and just flat out dropping the ball. I mean, both of the games the Chiefs lost, they win if the Chiefs make the catches that they're supposed to make in those games. Plain and simple. The Chiefs would be 8-0. They'd be undefeated. Agreed. So I think it's interesting that, I mean, and this kind of goes with what we've been talking about with the offense and just what our expectation level has been historically for the Chiefs offense. I think clearly we've seen the floor for this wide receiver room, and it's obviously the lowest floor of any pass catching unit that we've seen for any of these Chiefs teams. There is a scenario. I mean, like, you could sit here and imagine, and I don't want to go down imagination lane too far here because this is a dark place and this is a sunny podcast. You could sit here and imagine right now an AFC Championship game where, you know, Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore is wide open for the game-winning touchdown in the end zone and just goes through their hands, and the Chiefs don't make it to the Super Bowl, right? Like, you can imagine it because we've seen it happen twice this year in big games. Both of the games that the Chiefs have lost, where the wide receivers cannot make a play in a critical moment and it costs the Chiefs the game. You could see that happening in a playoff game and costing the Chiefs a chance to defend their Super Bowl title. So the floor is low. It's lower than it's ever been for the wide receiver room. But I'm actually not convinced that the ceiling is that much lower than what we've seen in the past. It's definitely not any lower than it was last year because they're the same players, right? Like, the only real difference personnel-wise is you've got Rashee Rice in there instead of Juju Smith-Schuster. And I think Rashee Rice is certainly a lower floor player than Juju because he's a rookie. Yeah. And he's got some drop issues that Juju didn't have. Juju was a little bit more sure-handed. But Rashee Rice absolutely has a higher ceiling than Juju did.
Agreed.
I mean, he's
much more explosive.
He's much more explosive, and he has a complete, fully healthy knee, which Juju did not have. So that lends to his explosiveness. And the Chiefs had a dynamic offense. They were the number one offense in the NFL last year, and they were, notwithstanding Pat's ankle in the playoffs, a pretty dynamic offense in the playoffs. I mean, they obviously scored 38 in the Super Bowl. They had a defensive score in there, but they were incredibly efficient in the Super Bowl against Philly, against a great defense. Yeah. We saw it on the first series and a half against Jacksonville, how incredibly dynamic they looked. And we've seen it this year. We've seen it against the Chargers. We've seen it against the Bears. Now, those aren't the best defenses in the world, but we've seen it in stretches. Like, I think we've seen the ceiling for this team, notwithstanding the wide receivers issues. The ceiling is still sky high. Like, I think they still have the ceiling, even without having added anybody at the trade deadline. The ceiling for this offense is still the best offense in the league. They haven't hit it. They haven't consistently shown it, but I do think that is the ceiling. So then the question becomes, if that's the ceiling, what is the probability that they're going to hit that ceiling when it matters? I mean, what's the probability that we're going to see, them playing at their highest level in the playoffs? I think it's pretty high. I mean,
if the past is any indication, this team always shows up in the playoffs.
This team always shows up in the playoffs. It always shows up down the stretch. And I mean, think about the best comp probably for this wide receiver room, and it's not apples to oranges, but it's probably the defense last year, right? Like, because it's a lot of young guys. It's a lot of rookies and first and second year players who have potential and maybe have not shown that yet. And listen, I'm fed up with Sky Moore too. I'm fed up with Kadarius Toney not being a thing. I wish Sky Moore was getting more, Rashee Rice. I wish he was getting more targets. They're sort of ramping him up and making him a focal point of the offense, which I think is great. But the rookies on the defense last year were tested in the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season, and there were many moments where they were found wanting and came up short. And by the time they got to the playoffs and, the AFC Championship game that we were just talking about, I mean, they were going up against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd until he got hurt. Would have changed everything if he had only
woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Sure, woulda, coulda, shoulda. But they came up big and they won the Chiefs that game. When the Chiefs were shorthanded in the wide receiver room and could only score 23 points in that game, the defense really won it for them. And I'm not saying that will happen, but I'm saying I think there's a good chance that will happen with this wide receiver unit. Call me crazy, and I certainly understand this is not going to be a popular take after what we witnessed on Sunday. Don't blame you.
But you're talking ceiling. You're not talking guarantees here. You're saying potential. And I think the Chiefs went into this season with that same mindset where they said, all right, we've seen what some of these guys can do in ideal scenarios and best case scenario type stuff where we like all their skill sets. We think they would complement Mahomes, blah, blah, blah. They sold us maybe a false bill of goods, but they, I think, kind of believed the false bill of goods that they sold us. And so, yes, you're right that if the Chiefs kind of hit on some bets that have looked like they're not going to hit on right now, if Kadarius Toney turns the corner, I have no idea if he can, but if he does, boy, this offense immediately, it's like getting a big trade chip if one of these guys breaks out. If Sky Moore becomes the guy that they picked in the second round, that they thought he would be a target monster and eat up the middle of the field, and Jesus Christ, I can't even believe I'm saying that stuff out loud. He's so bad. But if it happens, yes, the ceiling becomes, again, because you have the guy pulling the trigger that you need to, the best offense in football, for sure. And then I think what we have to, again, bring up that we brought up just recently was that if the ceiling and the floor of the offense are those. Now, first of all, the floor of the offense is still a playoff /
right. Still, it's what it is right now. I mean, they're not playing worse than this.
They're not. And this
is the floor.
Would get to the AFC Championship game at this floor.
Yes.
This is still a team 100%. That wins a divisional playoff game. That's how this team goes. So if that's the offense, if we're operating on that range on the offense, now just imagine for a second the ceiling and the floor with the defense. Like,
Sure.
the ceiling on this defense is holding a playoff team to like a touchdown, like an absolute going out there and mauling a team in the playoffs. And then Mahomes has to score 13 points to win the game. Like that's their ceiling. And that
I think the Chiefs could score 13 points with Travis Kelce, you and me, and Patrick Mahomes lining up.
Exactly. So like if that's the case, then like we have to kind of recalibrate a little bit and realize that this is a more complete team, even if they are the worst offense in the Mahomes era. They are still the most complete team in the Patrick Mahomes era, I think more than 2019. The 2019 offense was better, and the 2019 defense was good, but this defense kicks the 2019 defense's ass, in my opinion.
Yes.
These great. Guys are unbelievable out there on defense, so that gap, that can win you a ring, baby.
Absolutely, it can. That's the state of the Chiefs, and you know what? It's not a bad state to be in.
No.
Let's do our awards. And last week we doled out some extra 5-star men. We will not be doing that this week. For those of you unfamiliar with our awards segment, we have our 5-star men. 5-star man! 5-star man! Trash men.
I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage.
And our wild cards.
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
I will kick us off with my 5-star man. It's got to be a member of the defense, obviously. I'm gonna go with George Karlaftis. 2.5 sacks, tackle for loss, 7 combined tackles, a quarterback hit, a forced fumble. I totally understand that Russell Wilson is like easy mode for a pass rusher because he's got like the deer in the headlights thing. And, at least 40% of the time, he's just going to stand in the pocket and get sacked. And that happened a couple of times for the Chiefs pass rushers on Sunday. But George Karlaftis was a beast in this game. By the way, I will also point out that I've seen a couple of, Broncos film analysts out there that are like, oh my God, Russell Wilson was so good on Sunday. What? It's amazing. I literally just right before we logged on, I saw somebody say that he was balling, and they watched the tape. No, he took 6. He threw for 110 yards on 12 of 19 passing, and he took 6 sacks in the game. And they're all in. They're back in. The thing about Broncos fans, and this is actually what made me feel better after the game, was once they started chirping and talking smack. I was like, you actually are, Bengals fans notwithstanding, like the dumbest fan base in the NFL.
I'm glad you put the Bengals thing on there, but yes.
The fact that you guys are so gassed up by this performance and that you're back in on Sean Payton, you're back in on Russell Wilson, which you got to be at this point because you're not getting Caleb Williams or Drake May. Anyway, I digress. I get that Russell Wilson sort of easy modes for pass rushers, but George Karlaftis was a beast in this game. Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth mentioning, we've been making these comparisons between the 2022 team, which won the Super Bowl, and this team, where we were at with George Karlaftis. George Karlaftis was, Sky Moore was also on the team last year. So, we're at a different point in his development arc. But, you could make the argument that George Karlaftis through, 6 or 7 games last year was the Sky Moore of the defense. He was out there. He was playing a ton of snaps, right? He was getting some empty production just by virtue of the fact that he was playing 80% of the snaps, but he wasn't really affecting the game, and he wasn't really making impact plays. And now, a year later, look at him now. He's a beast.
I love it. That was the 6th time in the Mahomes era that a defender has had 2.5 or more sacks on the Chiefs. And those 6 times were Dee Ford in 2018, Chris Jones in 2018, Frank Clark in 2020, Chris Jones in 2021, Chris Jones in 2023, and George Karlaftis in 2023. That's elite edge rushing company.
That's elite company.
It happens about once a season for the Chiefs, and that was already the 2nd time it's happened in 2023. Just a beast mode performance, his best performance of his young career, and really one of those players that, if you squint and if you say, all right, if Karlaftis is going to become a guy, that's just another weapon on this defense.
Another dude.
Just another dude. So yeah, really, really good pick for you there. I'm going to keep the good times rolling with Harrison Butker and name him as my 5-star man. He, of course, is still perfect on the season. 18 of 18
crazy field
goals, 19 of 19 extra points. He now trails only Morton and Gary Anderson, the legendary Anderson kicking brothers, for perfect kicking seasons without a miss.
Really? That's amazing.
It is. Now, he, of course, hasn't completed his season. He's halfway through.
Right.
A lot of guys, I'm sure, have gone 8 weeks before end of the year without the miss, but those two guys are the only ones with more than 18 field goals with no misses in NFL history for a full season. So pretty good company to be in for Harry. He is, he hit a 56-yarder. It's not like he's hitting chip shots.
He's been bombing them.
He has been bombing. He's been bombing big ones when the Chiefs absolutely need him. It's funny. You and I sat there in Arrowhead on opening day as the Chiefs lost to the Lions, but when they were driving at the end, well, driving in quotes because they didn't really drive very far, but we were talking about, oh my God, this is going to be a perfect time for Harrison Butker to miss a game-winning field goal. Like, we put that out in there at the moment we saw this team this year, and he has just absolutely laughed in our faces and run with it. And not only has he not missed a field goal, he's not missed an extra point, which is something that he has struggled with before. So Harry, you are my 5-star man.
Yeah, he I don't know, man. Something clicked for him in the playoffs last year, and he hasn't missed a kick since last regular season.
The opposite. I don't feel that something clicked. I feel that he was in a bit of a funk for a little bit. Okay. And this is his non-funk version, which is
this is his default state.
Exactly. And he's a hell of a kicker. He has been since the day he came up to the Chiefs. He's consistently been the second best kicker in the NFL behind Justin Tucker since the day the Chiefs put him out there. So, that's more power to him. He's great.
Let's turn to our trash men. These are players who, through their play, are eating garbage on the field. We've got
who to pick from.
A number of candidates since 5 Chiefs turned the ball over in this game. Well, I should say 3 Chiefs turned the ball over for a total of 5. Listen, I'm not going to pick Patrick, even though he had 2 picks and he lost a fumble in this game, 59 passer rating. He had the flu. And not only did he have the flu, if I'm being honest, he threw some dimes in this game.
Yeah, he didn't get much help. Yeah.
Like the picks, okay, those are on him. He obviously lost a fumble on an oafish Bozois play, but I'm going with McCole Hardman for my trash man. He was a wild card for me last week. He obviously had the huge return in that game and a big 3rd down reception in his first game back with the Chiefs. I don't even know why he was returning the ball that he fumbled and put the Broncos on the 9-yard line for, that could be Dave Tobe. So I'm going to give this can be like a joint McCole Hardman, Dave Tobe trash man, because Dave Tobe should be telling him the coach, not like telling him, because he's obviously not like in this earpiece like you would be with a quarterback, but like that is coaching, to know when to let a ball go and not try and catch it or return it, because even if he catches that ball cleanly, he doesn't have anywhere to go. No. And if he just gets out of the way, it's going into the end zone and the Chiefs have it on the 25.
Or it stops at the 1. Who gives a fuck between the 5 and the 1 where you caught it? Like, that is not a risk worth taking.
And even if you catch it cleanly, they're going to hit you and the ball might pop out. So like, just take the ball on the 1, wherever, just take it and leave it. He came out after the game, and I have to give him credit. He said, I lost us the game. I wouldn't go that far, because there was a lot of blame to go around, obviously, for their turnovers. But that one was a killer. It gave the Broncos another touchdown when the Chiefs were, it was still a 1-score game, and the Chiefs had an opportunity to come back and make it a game. That eliminated that possibility, really, for the Chiefs, to put them in total desperation mode. So, McCole, you are a trash man.
I agree with McCole that he cost the Chiefs the game, but I don't think he was alone in costing the Chiefs the game. You know what I mean? I think his one mistake,
I get it,
cost them the game. But other people made one mistake that combined with him to also cost the game. I'll go. There are plenty of people to choose from here. I'll pick Sky, because Sky's one of the guys that I think about after the game, and I'm more pissed that it was him again that didn't do it. Like, if it had been Trav that drops the game-winning touchdown or whatever, like, he doesn't even get mentioned. That's not even a problem. He has done more for this team than pretty much everyone but Pat. So the fact that Sky Moore breaks open, now this touchdown would not have won the game, They were down 2 scores at the time with a couple minutes to go. It was probably still cooked. The Broncos were probably still going to just sit on the ball. But Pat on 4th and 2 drops a dime into the end zone.
I mean,
into the end zone.
You could not throw the ball.
No, you can. And he goes through his reads, and he's a perfect quarterback. So he sees a guy open for a touchdown. He can't even think about doing anything else other than giving that guy the ball. Like that's not a poor read. People, including myself at the game or at the time of the game, wanted him to just run off and take the easy 2 yards, get the first down, fight for another play. He had a fucking touchdown. Like when I watch that play again, it's like, yeah, I get it. I get it. And talk about, you've got to trust your players. You've got to trust your receivers. They talk about trust all the time. And like, if he doesn't throw that ball and Sky goes back to the tape and he's like, dude, that was me.
Yeah, it was open.
I was open. What happened? That's frustrating too. So the most frustrating part is, of course, not only that he drops it, but that after the game and in the media and, all the excuses that are now, Andy even goes to bat for Sky and says, well,
Andy was gaslighting us a little bit.
He said the defender was kind of holding his inside arm down a little bit. Sky said, well, I'm sure you saw that there was a grab, but I've got to make that play. On to the next one. Which is not, you've got to talk about that play eating you alive. You cannot on to the next one, that play.
Right.
Like that's not the right attitude that I want to see. Andy, I know, goes to bat for his guys 100% of the time. That's what he does. He will never go up there and say, yeah, you should have made that play. Never. He's never done it before. He'll never do it since. It's the reason the guys love him and want to go to war for him and all the stuff. The things that make Andy a great head coach, number one is probably the relationship with the players above even play design and above, everything else. It's the culture. And if he goes up there and shits on a player, especially a young guy, but like anybody really, then that's not him. That's not. So I get it. I'll excuse him for that. Anyways, Sky Moore, you've been our trash man before. You'll be our trash man again. You were our trash man this week.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire saved from trash man status this week.
Right. This week.
One touch for 4 yards, and he is spared the stay of execution because other guys had a chance to trash it up more than he did. Let's go to our wild cards. These are guys that are capable of anything, and I am picking L'Jarius Sneed, capable of anything depending on how the refs call the game.
Mm-hmm.
He was matched up on Cortland Sutton in this game most of the time outside, and Cortland Sutton finished this game two catches for 29 yards, 1 touchdown, which, all things considered, not a terrible performance from L'Jarius Sneed on the outside against Cortland Sutton. There were 3 pass interference calls in this matchup, and 2 of them were called against L'Jarius Sneed. 1 of them was called against Cortland Sutton. In my opinion, the 2 calls, that went against Sneed could definitely have been called against Cortland Sutton. One of them absolutely should have been called against Cortland Sutton. Correct. And the other was borderline. Listen, these guys are both physical. Cortland Sutton's like not a speedster. He's a bigger receiver that's going to be physical on the outside with the DB. And L'Jarius Sneed, is a physical defensive back. And, to me, if you've got a wide receiver that wants to be physical and you've got a DB that wants to be physical, and both of those guys are comfortable with playing that kind of game, let them play. Let them fight, just let them go at it, on the outside, let them hand fight, let them shove, whatever it's going to be, as long as a guy isn't doing something egregious. Both of those guys want to play that style of game. And here the officials were just kind of like, 3 times out of the, handful of times that these guys matched up and the ball came their way are throwing a flag. And because of the nature of the matchup, specifically between these 2 players, I know that we've talked about the rules of football on this podcast a few times in the last several weeks, but if both guys are comfortable with that style of play, let them play. And the officials did not do that. You get 2 DPIs called against Sneed, 1 offensive pass interference called against Sutton. I really feel like, number one of those calls probably should have gone Sneed's way that ended up going against him. But even the other one, if it's a borderline call and that's how those guys want to play the game, just let them play. So all in all, I felt like this was just a pretty standard L'Jarius Sneed game, and he gets a little bit of a bad rap because he gets called for 2 pretty borderline calls. That's a wild card performance, in my opinion.
I agree. Snead's a dog. The one that was second and 16 that they had a DPI on Snead there that gave him the first down was infuriating. The Chiefs were right in that thing. They were down 5, and the Broncos were at their own 29. They, of course, would eventually go down and do the punt to McCole Hardman that was blocked on that drive. But anyways, good pick there for Snead. For a player that is capable of anything, am going to go with Patrick Mahomes here. He played with the flu, and he was not good, which was something that I wasn't sure he was capable of doing. So he has shown a wild card side to him that, no, he's not a football robot. He's not going to go out there and be God's gift to earth every time he plays.
Has he ever been a trash man for us, ever?
Yeah, I want to say probably.
I think maybe once.
Yeah, probably one of those blowout losses, but certainly not. I mean, it maybe once ever. 3 turnovers, no touchdowns, 3 sacks, 59 rating. His flu game that everyone was talking up before this game started, as if that was something to be proud of, that, oh, he's got the flu, you guys better watch out. Dude, the flu sucks. That was a game to forget.
Let me also just say here, the reason the flu game is a thing is because of Michael Jordan. And what we have to acknowledge here as part of the podcast is that the guy didn't have the fucking flu. He had food poisoning.
Yes.
He had food poisoning.
Food poisoning.
All right?
Yeah.
He didn't have the flu.
Oh, great
It's called
point.
the flu
Great
game.
point.
But if Michael Jordan had actually had the flu, he probably would have scored like 8 points, and the Bulls would have lost that game.
Right.
And nobody would call it the flu game because it would be like, oh yeah, Michael Jordan had the flu and he
sucked. Yeah, but the food poisoning game doesn't really roll off the tongue. It's not as heroic.
No, it doesn't.
It's like you ate bad gas station sushi or whatever.
As you said, having the actual flu
sucks.
It
sucks.
It's bad, especially if you have to fly to high altitude and play a football game in adverse conditions.
And his whole family had been sick, so
it was like 20 degrees. He's at high altitude and he has the flu. Come on.
Yeah. Playing a team that fucking hates him and wants to rip his soul out and isn't going to go easy on him at all in any way. I mean, he never stood a chance, honestly. And we knew that. I know ball. We talked about this game. No. I'm sorry. I'm going to admit that we did not have faith. And we were talking about losing that game literally
from the first drive. Yep. No, I mean, it was bad. And I tried the reverse jinx action, but pretty quickly just morphed into me accurately predicting that the game was going to go badly. And that's the beauty of reverse jinx, is that like
you're always right.
if I'm right, then I correctly predicted the Chiefs' demise. And if I'm wrong, that's great, because then it means the Chiefs did something good and they win the game.
It's a good bit by you. It's very smart.
It's good. It developed out of a genuine pessimism from watching Chiefs games that was not rewarded by the Chiefs, doing bad things. They just seemed to do good things. And I thought, maybe I can just play this off as a bit. And I don't know, it might have run its course because it did not work on Sunday. But that is a great wild card pick by you, although the true wild card really is Michael Jordan for the flu game that was actually not the flu. Let's talk about this matchup on Sunday. Chiefs are traveling to Germany to take on the Miami Dolphins in Frankfurt. This is technically a home game for the Chiefs, but Tyreek Hill will not be returning to Arrowhead. They will be playing in Deutschland. It is an 8:30 a.m. kickoff in Kansas City. Your thoughts?
I hate this game. I hate the matchup. I hate the time. I hate the context of where the Chiefs are in the season before they have to play it. I hate the travel. I'm not into anything that's going on here, except for the fact that the Chiefs play up to their opponents as well as playing down to their opponents. They play a close game regardless of if their opponent is 6-2 or 2-6. They just do. That's just, we know it. We have the whole system that proves it. And so, my hope, or at least the thing that I'm clinging on to here, is that no matter why all the circumstances are not in the Chiefs' favor in this game, they're still favored in Vegas, and Vegas knows what the hell they're doing, and it's going to be close. We just have to hope that the Chiefs pull it off in the fourth quarter. That's my feelings right now. What about you?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we'll get into the X's and O's of this game, but it's going to be an exciting matchup. For me, it is going to be on my wedding anniversary, so I've made some plans for me to be able to watch the game. My wife doesn't know what those are, so I'll keep those to myself for now, just in case. She doesn't listen to the podcast, I don't think, but
what a bad way to give away your plans.
Yeah, I'll give it away when the time is right. So the Dolphins are already in Germany. They flew out at the beginning of the week. The Chiefs will fly out on Thursday night,
which I hate.
They will arrive on Friday morning. Why do you hate it? Just out of curiosity.
Because I don't think that I
because you got jet lag one
time. Yeah,
sure.
I want them to have more time.
So
I just don't like
your personal experience is you traveled to Germany and you got jet lagged, right? That's what we're basing it on.
Italy and got jet lagged.
Okay,
it's very close.
Sure, it is. Similar. They're in the same time zone. So
they are.
I will tell you why you're dead wrong. First of all, Bobby Stroop, Mahomes' personal trainer,
I wouldn't know. I was blocked.
You would not know, but he came out with data. He actually screenshotted and tweeted out some scientific studies about Olympic athletes and their travel schedules, which align more closely with what the Chiefs are doing than what the Dolphins are doing. I will say this. I actually have traveled to Germany, not Italy, same time zone, but literally to the country of Germany twice in the past 2 years. I went there 2 years ago for my Zeppelin tour, and I went there this year. I was actually in Switzerland, so I guess technically not Germany. But I mean, they're they're right next to each other.
I was like, when was the second Germany trip? I'm thinking Switzerland.
And I did not get jet lagged either time, and really didn't even come close to getting jet lagged either time. The trick is if you fly out at night and you sleep on the plane, even if you get 4 or 5 hours of sleep, you get in the following morning and you just go about your day. And maybe you need an energy drink to be able to get through your day. But the last 2 times I've flown over there, and I went to Germany in 2014 as well. So I've gone to that general area 3 times. I've not been jet lagged ever. As long as you take a little bit of precaution on the plane ride over and you get some sleep. And listen, they're not playing the game the next day. It's not like they're getting off the plane and then playing the game that day. They have all day Friday, so you got to get through Friday. You can't sleep. You can't nap during the day on Friday. You got to get to 8 o'clock Friday night. Hit the hay. Get up Saturday. You're gonna have pretty much the whole day Saturday to practice, get acclimated, and then they play at 2:30 on a Sunday. I think they're going to be completely fine. They obviously have not actually any of the players on the team except for Travis Kelce and James Winchester. The last time they played in London in 2015. Yeah. But all these guys are travelers. In fact, Travis talked about it on the podcast on New Heights today, said that he doesn't get jet lagged, and he could wake up from a dead sleep in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning and be ready to play a football game.
Of course,
which is the attitude you want to have. But speaking of the international series, Chiefs are 2-0. They had that 45-10 win over the Lions in London in 2015. That was the second game of that 11-game win streak that culminated in the Chiefs' first playoff win since the 90s.
Woo!
And then of course, in 2019, in the Super Bowl season, with Mahomes still coming off of that horrible knee injury, playing on the sand-like surface of Estadio Azteca in Mexico City that knocked Tyreek Hill out of the game in the first quarter. And the Chiefs beat the Chargers 24-17, went on to win the Super Bowl that year. I mean, other than the jet lag aspect, this should be a fairly routine trip for them. They don't have to deal with the weird Mexico City extreme high altitude. They just have to get some sleep on the airplane and wake up on Friday ready to get to work.
That's true. Do you remember the international game that was canceled that the Chiefs were going to play in the recent past?
Oh, well, they were supposed to play the Rams in Mexico City.
There you go.
And it ended up
to
Los Angeles.
The Coliseum. Yeah, and they lost 54-51.
54-51.
Who can forget? I guess I'm thinking back, and
they canceled it because of Shakira, right? Was that because Shakira trashed the field?
I thought there were fires.
Well, but there were fires in California, weren't there?
Oh, right. So they weren't sure if they were going to be able to move it to the Rams or to LA because of the fires. But you're right. Shakira trashed the stadium and it was not in a position to play. And they were down there 2 days before the game. And the NFL was like, we can't do this. Yeah. I will say that I didn't have any respect for the jet lag. So I went in 2008 when I was 21.
Sure, of course.
I slept 7 hours on the 9-hour flight. I landed at 2 a.m. and then I slept.
Oh, you landed at 2 a.m. I mean,
yeah. And then I slept until 8 or 9. a.m. from the point of landing. So I think I slept like 14 of the previous 16 hours, and it just fucked me up for like 2 days. So
yeah, college kids, man.
Yeah, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It was 2008. It was before the internet. So
yeah, how
there
could
was
you
no way I
possibly
could
know
have
what you were
known
gonna do?
anything to do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do think that this team is, if you're going to trust a NFL team to handle weird situations and adverse conditions and playing off schedule and doing things that they're not normally used to, like give me a veteran laden group that's been there, done that, played in big games, all that stuff. Give me an Andy Reid led team. Like clearly, they come off of buys well. They come into the first weeks usually pretty well. Like they're a well-coached team. And that's what this comes down to. It comes down to prep. It comes down to people making sure that all the guys, do their right schedule stuff and all that. And so I trust the Chiefs to be able to handle this pretty well.
All right, let's talk about the storyline that we can't ignore, the elephant in the room. Tyreek Hill playing against the Chiefs for the first time since he was traded, the cheetah in the room, since he was traded to the Dolphins following the 2021 season. Obviously, the Chiefs roll around in their first season without Tyreek Hill and win the Super Bowl. Much has been made of the fact that Tyreek Hill has more yards than all the Chiefs wide receivers this year combined. He is on pace to shatter the single season receiving record. He and AJ Brown are both on pace to beat it, but Tyreek Hill, despite the fact that AJ Brown just set an NFL record for the most consecutive 125-yard games, Tyreek Hill is still comfortably ahead of him in the receiving yardage race.
Because Tyreek gets like 170 per game. Like his ceilings are insane.
So how are you feeling about Chiefs versus Tyreek?
Horrible. As bad as I've felt in a single player matchup against the Chiefs ever. And I mean,
even including Tom Brady.
Yes, it is. And Brady had the aura that Tyreek now has, which is that he's the best at what he does and he's going to rip your fucking soul out, which honestly, Tyreek didn't really have that mode in Kansas City. Now, he had games where he would most certainly do that, of course, as we know, but the just sheer back-breaking long play. So I looked up his receiving yards through his first 8 games in his whole career, and his 2 in Miami are the 2 top by over 150 yards from his top year in Kansas City, which was 2021, was really good. So he had 735 yards in 2021 with the Chiefs through 8 games, almost averaging 100 yards a game. He's at last year 961, this year 1,014 yards through 8 games. He's leveled up. He has leveled up, and part of it, maybe all of it, but certainly a lot of it is because they use him and use him and use him and target him and just really, really lean on it. They rely on it on offense in Miami in a way that with Travis Kelce's existence in Kansas City, the Chiefs just never did. They never had to target Tyreek 12, 13 times a game. They would sometimes, but it was never a necessity like it really is in Miami.
Right.
So that's the on-field just Tyreek as a wide receiver that I'm worried about. Obviously, mentality. I mean, dude's out for blood. He knows that he wants to score as much. He wants to have the best game of his career in this game, not in the 2 Super Bowls he played in this game.
We won the Super Bowl, which has got to just make him.
Yes.
I mean, not that I would necessarily say, and I'm not saying that Tyreek doesn't care about winning Super Bowls. I don't think that that's his top motivation in his NFL career, and that's completely fine. I think he wants to be the best wide receiver in the league. I think he wants to be seen as that. I think he wants to be compensated like that. I think both of those goals are more important to him than team success and winning the Super Bowl. And I'm not knocking him for that. But the fact that the Chiefs traded him away and then won the Super Bowl without him has got to be an additional motivator for him that we don't have in reverse, because we're the ones that won the Super Bowl. Like
Correct.
We already rubbed it in
Correct.
his face to the extent we wanted or needed to do that. So
yeah, it's a bad, Tyreek Hill, when he's asleep, can go out there and get 200 on you. Like when he doesn't even care at all about you, he can just go do some cardio and catch some balls. And next thing you know, he had an all-time day. When he's out for blood, I just don't know if the Chiefs can handle it. I don't know if they can do it. I don't know. I mean, they're going to throw a ton of stuff at him, and he's going to break some plays. He's probably going to end up with 200 yards receiving without even really. It's
Well,
scary. I'm scared.
We'll talk more about Tyreek, but first let's talk about the offense when the Chiefs have the ball. We've already discussed this. The Chiefs are still a top 5 offense by pretty much every metric, including DVOA, which we didn't mention in the numbers, the figures. They are still 5th there, despite a lackluster, completely subpar performance by them against the Broncos. The Dolphins are 22nd in defensive DVOA, which is not great. And they brought in Vic Fangio, who, you know, sort of heralded in this whole too high shell thing. That's Vic Fangio's scheme. They're all running sort of a variation of that. Brandon Staley, before he became Bozo head coach of the Chargers, was running that pretty effectively with the Rams, but he got it from Vic Fangio. And, you know, they just got Jalen Ramsey back last week. He had been out for the entire year. They had a decent defensive performance against Philadelphia, but not a great performance. The Dolphins pass rush, to me, is very interesting. Not graded particularly well by PFF, but they are 5th in pass rush win rate, which is a ESPN stat. And then next gen stats, they've gotten pressure faster than all but 8 teams when you include blitzes. And when you take blitzes out, just rushing with 4, they're still getting pressure at the 11th fastest rate. So the amount of time it takes from the snap for them to generate pressure against the quarterback, on average, the 11th fastest team to do that. I think it kind of comes down, though. I mean, if you look at their players, they've got some guys, but not, there's not an Aaron Donald or a Von Miller, prime Von Miller, not washed Bills Von Miller.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
They don't have a superstar pass rusher on this team. They just have some solid guys. And I think what really enhances this pass rush, I kind of almost look at it as like a 2018 Chiefs pass rush. Now, the Dolphins, don't get me wrong, are much more talented in the coordinator booth, where they have Vic Fangio instead of Bob Sutton, and they're much more talented on the back end. They have, Jalen Ramsey. They've got talented DBs. But what I mean is the Dolphins have been, boat racing teams on offense. You look up and it's, midway through the first quarter and you're already down 14-0. Mm-hmm. And I think the 2018 Chiefs offense created a similar situation. You remember the Chiefs defense was bad that year, but they led the league in sacks because that defensive line was able to just pin their ears back. Like 85% of the time you're playing with a lead, and other teams are going to have to throw on you because they know that you are going to continue to score points and you're going to drop 40. And so they, the first drive of the game, if they lose there, if they win the coin toss and they go out and they score on you, you're basically behind the 8 ball from, the opening drive of the game, and you're going to have to throw. And when you have to throw, teams can pin their ears back and they can rush the passer. And so I think really this matchup comes down to the Chiefs offense being able to keep pace with whatever Miami is doing offensively.
I think that's fair. I certainly think that, the blueprints, if there is one, that Philly win 31-17 over the Dolphins, while the Chiefs aren't built the way Philly is on offense, they certainly would slow down the Miami defense or the Miami offense in similar ways than what Philly did to it. And there's, it's kind of that I really like this 2018 Chiefs comparison, and I have for a bit, because not only do you have the explosive offense and Tyreek Hill and not a very good defense, but this Dolphins team hasn't won anything, right? Like they are not this like seasoned multi-time, playoff winning, anything like that. This team has not been punched in the mouth. Like some of these players have been on teams or whatever. But like this team hasn't faced a ton of adversity just in general. It's kind of all been gravy in Miami. They've been winning a bunch of games and they've been doing it in fun ways and all that stuff. But like, I'm just interested if the Chiefs come out there and they kind of smack the Miami offense in the mouth even 1 or 2 times in the first couple of drives, even if it's like a 3-and-out or a turnover or just something that's kind of a momentum changing play that the Chiefs defense makes. I just wonder how Miami responds to that, because they're such front runners in their game scripts that like once they have to kind of, sack up a little bit. Like, I don't know if they have it in them. They certainly didn't have it in them when they played Philly. They couldn't come back in that game or really get a lot going there. And then the other time that happened was against Buffalo, where they got their asses kicked 48-20. And in that game, Buffalo jumped out to just this, massive 31-14 halftime lead. They just strung touchdowns together early. They punched them in the mouth. And I'm interested to see how Miami responds if that's the case, if the Chiefs can get out to a lead on.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Dolphins are first in offensive DVOA, obviously. Chiefs are still fifth in defensive DVOA. They are hanging on to that top 5 ranking on each side of the ball, offense, defense, special teams. Still top 5 in DVOA in each of those individual units. They're fifth in 2 of those.
I think those are fair assessments.
But I think that's completely fair. I think that's completely fair. So it is strength on strength. Obviously, the Dolphins are, elite on offense, but you're right. The 2 games that the Dolphins have lost, they have gotten punched in the mouth early, and they haven't been able to come back from that. And even if you go back to last season, obviously they had some issues with Tua's health, but I think of that late season game where Tua was healthy, where the Dolphins went to LA to play the Chargers, and everybody sort of expected the Chargers to give up 40 points, which they did when they played the Dolphins this year. But everybody sort of expected this mediocre Chargers defense to get rolled by the, healthy Tua Tyreek offense. And the Chargers came out and punched them in the mouth and ended up dominating that game. And Tua ends up getting hurt, I think, in the second half of that game, if memory serves, again, and getting knocked out. But they didn't get anything going. And I do
Tua
think
finished that game. He was the only quarterback that Miami had, but he only went 10 of 28.
That's crazy.
And, they lost 17-23. They didn't have a good game.
Yeah, it's crazy. Even Brandon Staley was able to come up with a plan to punch this team in the mouth. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that the Chiefs are necessarily going to have all the answers here, but Steve Spagnuolo is going to have a plan for how to punch this team in the mouth. And the Chiefs have the defensive line to be able to do that. That's the other thing that the 2 teams that have beaten Miami have in common. Before Buffalo started experiencing the injury situation that they're experiencing now. Yeah. Really strong defensive line when they played against Miami, and they had a strong back end too. But Philly, even with a pretty banged up back end and frankly, mediocre at best linebacker play, that defensive line of Philly just dominated up front, got quick pressure, forced them off their spots. And if you can get Tua off his spot and make him throw on the run, he's not nearly as good. So let's talk about Tyreek. I want to pose this question to you and get your perspective on this. I have a theory, but who gets more of an advantage from the fact that Tyreek Hill was a Kansas City Chief, Tyreek or the Chiefs?
I've been endlessly fascinated by this question because there's so many interesting, details here. On the one hand, it's basically Spags versus Tyreek for the most part, because Tyreek hasn't played with a lot of these guys. They're all very young. They obviously drafted a bunch of guys the year that they traded Tyreek and used some of the picks.
Yeah. I'll jump in really fast. I've got it pulled here.
Please.
The only Chiefs DB who has even practiced against Tyreek, who is teammates with him, is L'Jarius Sneed. They were teammates in 2020 and 2021. The Chiefs have 2 DBs who have played against him as members of other teams. So Justin Reed, as a member of the Texans, has played against Tyreek a couple of times. Got mossed by Tyreek in the regular season.
In his comeback.
In his comeback game in 2019, I think it would have been. And
20,
then,
no, you're right. 19,
19 regular season, and then would have been Justin Reed was on the field, obviously, when the Chiefs came back from down 24-0 in the playoffs. So Justin Reed, not a great history against Tyreek Hill, but he has played against him.
Yeah, and nobody does.
Mike Edwards, who was a Buccaneer in 2020, he was on the Buccaneers team that gave up 203 yards and 2 touchdowns to Tyreek in the first quarter of that game in Tampa in the regular season, and then shut him down the rest of the way. 64 yards the rest of that game, and then 7 catches for 73 yards in the Super Bowl. Obviously, some extenuating circumstances there. But those are the 3 guys. Those are the 3 guys on the Chiefs roster in terms of the DBs that have any experience, that have seen Tyreek Hill and been on the same field as him in practice or in a game. So not very many.
Not very many. And as Jason Kelsey hilariously pointed out this week on New Heights, it's different when Tyreek runs by you. It is just he's a souped up version of a NFL player. And that game speed is something you can try and practice for. But I mean, Belichick's talked about this before when they've matched up. You can't really simulate speed. You can simulate height and size. You can get even guys that are holding on to brooms and stuff. And like, you can kind of, if a guy is just bigger than what you have when you're practicing, you can work around that. You really can't with speed. He would give his wide receivers 3 extra steps before they would snap the ball that were simulating Tyreek, to just be like, look, by the time this ball is snapped, like you have to know where you're going, because he's going to get there first. So yeah. So the on-field experience is something. There's also schematically talking about what he likes to do, his tendencies, how he can be tricked and beaten, and all the things that when you practice against someone, or when you coordinate against someone in practice over and over the course of a couple of years, which Spags would have been, of course, 19, 20, and 21, 3 years of being able to work with Tyreek, you pick up some stuff. You pick up some tells and some tendencies and some things and that's all. This is all just part of the grander scheme of preparing for any NFL player and offenses and all that stuff. There is so much intelligence gathering that goes on, but no one would know more firsthand than not only Spags as the defensive coordinator, but Andy and Pat on the offensive side of the ball.
Right.
They drew up plays for him. They know what works. They know if they would call something and maybe he wouldn't cut it the way that they wanted him to, or he wouldn't run it all the way that
or he can't get open against this coverage, or he struggles against this kind of coverage.
They know his holes. They know the holes in his swing, and in a way that you just don't really get scouting game film, because game film, if there's a hole, they're not going to run that play during the game, but they sure as shit found it in practice before they ran it. So like, yeah, there's all that kind of, but then you of course flip the perspective. Tyreek going up against Spag defenses every week in practice, and some of those things that Spags likes to do, the reason that he's successful is because it's a bit of a surprise. It's a bit of a kitchen sink approach. It's kind of like, oh, he's not going to see this coming. Like Tyreek's going to see all that shit coming. Like that's not Spags. I'm sure he'll throw a curveball or two at him, but there's just no way that Tyreek's going to go into this game and not know what he's going to get from these DBs. He's just, I'm sure of it. So your original question was about the advantage. Who has more of an advantage? Is it Tyreek? Is it the Chiefs? I lean towards, because Tyreek is one person and the Chiefs have 7 or 8 brains that they can kind of game plan this for. I lean towards it being the Chiefs, because I think if Andy and Pat and Spags and Reed and Snead, all those guys, if they all bang their heads together and they all say, all right, going into this game, here's what we're thinking. What do you think? Here's what we're going to try and call. Here's what we think he's going to try and do to us. Like they can get together as a village and game plan against Tyreek, whereas Tyreek's just going to have to keep everything in his mind himself. And he can't really, there's not much Mike McDaniel's going to be able to help him with. He's never even, I guess McDaniel would have coached. No, he hasn't coached against the Chiefs, right? Because the game in Miami was what's his face, that good coach.
Brian Flores. Yes,
Brian Flores. So all that saying, I'm leaning Chiefs, but it's going to be so interesting.
Yeah, I think from a schematic standpoint, the advantage for sure is with the Chiefs for all the reasons you said. I do think the biggest advantage the Chiefs have is Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And even Nagy was here for 2017 when Tyreek had really his first monster breakout year with Alex Smith at quarterback. I think the other advantage for the Chiefs is that even though obviously Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins offensive coaching staff will have scouted the Chiefs and be familiar with what Steve Spagnuolo likes to do, Tyreek has never played against the Steve Spagnuolo defense before, except in practice. And obviously, a scrimmage, a training camp practice is not going to give you the same unpredictability as a real game. A lot of times the offense knows what the defense is running and vice versa. Yep. And obviously in a live game, that's not going to be the case. So they have played each other once technically before. Steve Spagnuolo was the defensive coordinator for the Giants in 2017, which was Tyreek's rookie year. The Giants won that game 12-9. 2017. Oh yeah, that's right.
He was
that
16.
Second. Yep, that's right. So it would have been his second season, and again, really his first breakout season. The Chiefs lost that game 12-9 in overtime to Steve Spagnuolo. So he was in his bag against a really good 2017 Chiefs offense. But that was before people had the book on Tyreek Hill. That was kind of his first breakout year with Alex Smith, and then obviously 2018 really through 2019 and the first part of 2020 was when the Chiefs Tyreek Hill offense was at its peak. But that was before, the too high shell and all these different coverages that people around the league came up with specifically to stop Tyreek. That was when that kind of all started. And the Chiefs know all of those coverages inside and out because that's what teams are playing against the Chiefs every week. So if they want to replicate what teams were doing and running with success against their offense, they could do that. They have 2.5 years of film of teams running that against them when they had Tyreek Hill on their team. Obviously, it's different because the Dolphins run different offense from the Chiefs, and they're doing so much stuff to get Tyreek, clean releases off the line of scrimmage that the Chiefs weren't necessarily doing, putting him in motion, which is something the Chiefs love to do in the playoffs and will run motion at like the highest rate in the league in the playoffs, but don't necessarily do in the regular season because they don't have to. But the Dolphins will do that, and the Chiefs have to be ready for that. It's going to be really interesting. It's going to be fascinating to see how this matchup plays out. I think Tyreek, I'm sure that he'll have a big game, but the Chiefs certainly have the firepower to keep pace if they play a clean game. One other quick observation on this, alluded to this when we were talking about the injuries, but the Dolphins' run game is pretty different from what the Chiefs have seen so far this year. They don't have Devin Achane out there. He's still on IR, which is great news for the Chiefs. And in fact, Raheem Mostert, their other primary running back, did not practice today. Don't know what his status is going to be going into Sunday, but he's a speedster. So is Achane. They just run a lot of outside runs. They're just trying to get to the edge and then beat you around the edge. And, the Chiefs really missed Nick Bolton against the Broncos, but the Broncos were a completely different kind of run game. They're trying to beat you between the tackles. They're trying to beat you, with power. And they don't really, aside from Jaleel McLaughlin, who's got a little bit of burst. I mean, Javonte Williams isn't going to beat you around the edge with speed. Nope. He might be able to break a tackle or force a missed tackle, but he just isn't going to, hit the afterburners and run by you. And Nick Bolton is a thumper, and he would have been great for the Chiefs to have with the kind of game the Broncos wanted to play on Sunday. I don't know that the Chiefs will miss Nick Bolton as much against Miami, just because Nick Bolton in space against Raheem Mostert, not a favorable matchup, not a favorable matchup for him. He would much rather hit somebody in the hole and stonewall him for a loss than try and chase somebody down in the open field. But I mean, this to me is an area that, we need to keep an eye on. It looks like Tranquil will play. As I mentioned, the Eagles were able to shut down the Dolphins run game with really like pretty mediocre on paper group running backs. So I would imagine the Chiefs took, I'm sure, extensive notes. Obviously, there's a lot of shared DNA between Philly and Kansas City, not just through the Kelseys, but the coaching staffs and front offices have relationships that go way back. I'm sure that the Chiefs have looked very closely at what the Eagles did in that game, and hopefully we'll have some similar success on Sunday.
Yeah, it's maybe Bolton wouldn't have been tackling those guys, but certainly when the linebackers are doing 40-yard wind sprints because they're out there thinner by one person, I'm sure they're going to be sitting there going, damn it, Nick could have taken this rep instead of me holding my hips. Absolutely. But it's I don't think the Dolphins are going to want to beat the Chiefs with the running game. Not to say that they won't run, but I think the Dolphins kind of, when the Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins, the narrative was like, what are the Chiefs doing? There were people obviously like the Dolphins took a big swing and all that stuff, but it was more about the Chiefs losing Tyreek and what that was going to do.
That's true.
And that's not just because the Chiefs are kind of the center of the NFL narrative or because we are Chiefs fans. That was how the trade was covered. And I'm sure there's a little bit of like, the Chiefs have owned the NFL for a couple years, but the Dolphins haven't really gotten their shots at the Kings. Like not the, they played them down in Miami after the Super Bowl win, but that wasn't this team. So my thinking here is that the Dolphins want to go out and show like, hey, not only are we a good team, but we can pass the ball better than those guys ever could. We have Waddle, we have Hill, we've got all these. I just think
got Tua.
We've got Tua, Tua Non is of course going to be all over that. I think they're going to throw the ball a shitload. That's what I expect. I expected the Chiefs to have to use a lot of DBs in this game, which is not a bad deal because the Chiefs obviously have a lot of good depth at DB, and they've got some guys that could go out there and cover. And I'm not worried about the Chiefs secondary in this game. And I think the pass rush, if the Dolphins are going to drop back to pass a lot, they can get home, especially with Chuck Nasty in there now, Charles Menahu. I just think that there's a lot to like about the matchup against the number one offense in the NFL for the Chiefs.
Yeah. It's going to be a fascinating matchup. I mean, one of the games of the year. I wish that I could feel better about it. Like if the Chiefs had gone out and clobbered the Broncos on Sunday, like we expected them to, I'm sure we feel much, much better about this matchup. It's going to be tough to have a ton of confidence, but we will see what happens. We will see you guys next week. It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom.